The world has become more aware of the importance of preserving the environment, especially with visible changes brought on by climate change. Countries have made a committed effort to ensure the preservation of the climate, as many of them are signatories to the Paris Climate Agreement. But for a country like Nigeria with lots of environmental issues such as oil spillage, gas flaring, deforestation, use of plastics, overpopulation, among others, the country still has a long way to prove its commitment to reducing the devastating consequences of all these forms of pollution to promote a green environment. Now, joining me for this discussion is architect Biodun Onabanjo, an environmentalist. He's also a design and architecture from the University, MSc, the Environmental Design and Architecture from the University of Lagos in 1982, a member of the Nigerian Institute of Architecture. His expertise include, but not limited to, construction, spatial design and management, project management. Thank you so much for being with us on TVC Breakfast.
Thanks for having me. Good morning.
Yeah, the kind of environment we have now probably is not the kind of environment envisaged by our forefathers and also those of us that are currently in the world at the moment. When it comes to this part of the world, Nigeria precisely, and also even in the Southwest, how would you describe what we see when we open our eyes outside?
The environment that we find ourselves currently, it's not exactly what we would like to have. Before the advent of independence, one had a picture of what the country looked like. It wasn't as populated as we are now. Our values and the value system then are not exactly the same now. Yeah. And a lot of things have changed between then and now. But when you benchmark ourselves with developing countries that were at par with us at that time, we're talking of pre-independence in the 60s, when we look at the countries like Singapore, South Korea, and all that, they're still able to manage the environment alongside with their growth and technology. But in our own case, we haven't transitioned from where we were then to an equally important area that can match our aspirations then with now. A lot of things have happened in a rather haphazard manner, particularly in the areas of environment. If you recall, in the colonial era, you had what we call government reservation areas, very wooded expanse of greens. You probably have one tiny little building on 1 acre of land. You have the roads lined with trees, canopied, everywhere it's cool. Yes, that was for a purpose. And of course, then too, you had lots of recreational parks for children and adults to mingle, because it promotes what we call equality and social inclusion. And people lived like we're a brother's keeper. But suddenly we're getting to a point where people are so distant, you know, we're not as we used to be, because we're not paying particular attention to what the environment should be like.
All right, because of our time, we need to raise this conversation. Fifth Go Forte annual paint splash, and then the theme, which is benefits of greens and open spaces. Talk to us about the benefit of greens and, as a matter of fact, open spaces, looking at our spatial design that we have now.
Yeah. See, there's a disease called claustrophobia. Okay. And the only antidote to that is open space. In architecture,
you mean the fear of closed spaces.
The fear of closed spaces. That's claustrophobia, and there's agoraphobia.
The fear of maybe public, something that is very big. Or,
exactly right. Now, what are the benefits of open spaces and greens? There's this feeling of freedom. You can express yourself. You can breathe. You can live. You can move. When you're in a clustered environment, it limits your creativity, it limits your productivity, limits the way you express yourself. But the moment you get into an open air, okay, then it expands your horizon. You're able to function cognitively in a better format than when you're in a clustered environment. So that's the psychological effect that the open spaces would give to people. In an open space, you could play. In an enclosed space, it's difficult for you to play.
Is that why when you are in a building and everywhere seems to be so clustered around you, it's referred to as sick building syndrome, something like that?
That's it. And you'd find out that where you don't have enough open spaces, if you check the level of crime in such a society, it's always high. Because you want people to be able to express themselves. You want people to be able to let out emotions, you know, pent-up emotions, to let it out. It's when you get into those open spaces, recreational grounds, playgrounds, and that's where champions actually emerge. You know, the world champions in football, in boxing, in athletics, they're able to express themselves because those facilities are there. But where they're not there, and they are in spaces, what they vent that on is in areas of crime. They're not able to articulate their thoughts. They use it for negative things.
There's chaos in their head.
That's it, chaos. Okay? But now we're advocating that, look, let's nature itself. I'm always getting cramped up. Let's open up. Let's have, no matter how the houses are, there must always be a safety valve where you escape into an open space.
So what then do we do? What then do we do when we have the kind of spatial design that we have here? If you go to the European countries, you see that large expanse of land. There you have a hamlet. I just call it a hamlet. Very beautiful building. Right. You know, somewhere there you have beautiful trees, flowers all around. You can breathe. You enjoy your lungs. But here we already have houses that are clustered together. We can't begin to break out. We can't begin to, you know, destroy people's houses when we know that we're having issues of buildings around, you know, free accommodation. I can't remember the terminology now.
Yeah, I think it's all about planning. When you set out a space, there are conditions on how buildings should be located. The planning laws that stipulate the area of greens that you must have within your building. There are planning laws that stipulate the airspace between one building and the other. Okay? But oftentimes, these things are overlooked. Where they're not overlooked, what they do is they penalize for you contravening, rather than to stipulate that, look, you have to get it right. It's not a question of penalizing, but doing it the way it's supposed to be done. Our challenge majorly is in the areas of infrastructure. Ideally, we should grow, we should expand, rather than limit ourselves to where already existed. But what happens in all the areas that we're seeing is because when we're shying to venture into new areas, to expand into new areas, so that as your economic level increases, you can afford to travel beyond where you are at the moment and establish your accommodation in a bigger space. Okay?
I'm afraid we have just a very short amount of time. I remember when we were talking a little earlier, you mentioned the concept of overdevelopment.
Okay.
We want a country, we want our country to be well developed.
Good.
We are underdeveloped, so they say.
Good.
So is it possible for us to overdevelop, or are we already overdeveloped?
We're certainly not overdeveloped, but there's certain areas of our development that are overcrowded, that are overburdened. Okay, take for instance, this is getting very rampant. Everything about the return on investment. You find a neighborhood that is strictly residential, which hitherto had been zoned as a medium density neighborhood. Medium as in maybe 2 families per plot. But because of the downward trend in the economy, people want to make money. So when you have a single family dwelling unit, that building is pulled down and a multi-family dwelling unit is put in there. So where the infrastructure had been designed for a single family, say of 6, now a multi-family unit of, say, 6 apartments of 6 people, that's 36. So your infrastructure is going to be overburdened. And that's the trend that is happening in our major city centers in Nigeria, which should be discouraged. Rather than allow people to pull down their structures and because the infrastructure is there, rather than you to expand infrastructure to other areas so that people can expand there, why don't you encourage the government to expand the infrastructure into greener areas such that you can express yourselves as opposed to overburdening the already existing infrastructure.
Biodun Onabanjo, I wanted to quickly, I wanted to wrap up on this particular note. You know, the benefit of greens and open spaces. We know that you have some activities that are actually probably ongoing or coming on board. Just speak to that very, very briefly, less than a minute, if you can.
We're having a flagship of, it's called the Paint Splash. It's been on for the past 5 years. This is the 5th edition. And what we do is to sensitize people about certain things within the environment. This year, the theme is benefits of greens and open spaces. So we're having the ceremony in Magodo, Kaudi Taiwo Zone, precisely. So we're inviting people from all walks of life, young and old, to come in. And what we do is sensitize the people that are in government, people that are in charge of such areas, to know the yearnings of the people. So we bring students from all walks of life to even take part in competition. Now they're taking part in a competition what we call a dream neighborhood. So we have students from schools in Lagos, Green Springs Schools, Temple College, Honeyland College, Methodist Girls High School, Baby College. They've all sent in their entries. And we're going to have the first 3 and we're going to give them prizes. Aside from that, we have placards that the students will parade with all the things that we expect that will make for a good neighborhood, a dream neighborhood. So that it's not a neighborhood that we'll see in films. It's not a dream neighborhood we'll see in cartoons, but something that will bring to our own realization in Nigeria. And that's the whole purpose of the Spain flash that we're going to have. So it's going to be quite colorful. And
the earth color is actually green.
Oh, yeah, it's green.
We need to imbibe that in our own environment as well to ensure that everything is green, not just painting green, but trees, lovely flora all around, and making sure that we live in a very better environment. That's the bottom line.
Absolutely.
Thank you very kindly, Architect Biodun Onabanjo, an environmentalist. Really appreciate.
Thank you very much. I've just been christened another name. Incidentally, Biodun is my middle name, but Architect Benga Onabanjo.
That's really appreciate.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
You have a beautiful day.